Welcome back to Inside Sources. Today I have an eminent Nigerian as my guest who was a former presidential candidate, is the publisher of Sowore Reporters, and is a notable Nigerian activist. I'd like to welcome back to Inside Sources Sowore. My brother.
Thank you, sir.
It's good to see you back in Inside Sources.
Absolutely, yes. It's great to be back here.
So where do we start? Let's take it from Batutomi's latest idea. I mean, since this is about the future of Nigeria, he came up with this idea of a shadow government. You know, and he says that, look, this is nothing against the system. It's not breaking the law, but he says that we need to have options tabled before the people, considering what he believes to be the floundering nature of state. What do you think about the idea?
Well, how do you replace a shadow government with another set of shadowy government? I do not begrudge anybody who thinks of solutions that can bring awareness to the people, to the point that they are pushed to do something about their social, political, and economic condition. But I do not think that setting up a government with names of people who call them a shadow government makes any difference. Because what is the shadow government going to be doing? You know, so they're supposed to provide alternative to each of the existing government portfolios, parastatals, and ministries and departments. How does that work, really? Apart from the fact that it sounds esoteric. Nothing beyond the creation of that shadow government will have any impact on the situation that is afflicting Nigeria today.
Yes. Well, I mean, you know, just to follow on that, the way I see it, you know, it just reminds me of what we did, if you remember.
Yes.
In New York, you know, I didn't call it the People's
Parliament. That's right.
Where we met regularly and we, you know, expressed ourselves. You know, where that was a parliament is different from a cabinet. You know, but I thought that is just, in my view, it seems to be a reflection of the failure of opposition to take government to task.
Well, I mean, if you look at it generally, it is a suitable match for parliamentary system of government, where actually those kind of government are somewhat recognized. Yes, but in the system that we're in, and to go back to what we did was to respond in diaspora to the decadence of, or the urgency of that time. Nigeria had no president. The guy who they claimed was president was sick and nobody knew his whereabouts. But in addition to that, we weren't just meeting, we were protesting. Yeah, so we had more than, and we had allies at home who were helping out, who were doing a lot of media work. But I'm just saying, so that it doesn't sound like, you know, I pour cold water on. My attitude towards this is that the government in place is already a shadow government. It does nothing. So to now go and create another superstructure named shadow government, that's my view, is not going to have any impact on what these guys are doing.
Okay, so so you don't see it as a reflection of the failure of opposition itself. Do you think? What do you think?
I see it as a reflection of the weakness of opposition. That their best response to what is wrong with Nigeria is to go and borrow an idea that they know cannot work. It's like, okay, we have been beaten down, we don't know what to do, but please, we are coming, or, you know, and you fly something, and, you know, and you could tell by how fast it came and disappeared that, you know, it just didn't catch anybody's fancy.
Interesting.
Yes.
Interesting. And I want to talk about NANS specifically as an example. You know, you were the president of Student Union in University of Lagos.
That's correct.
In the 90s, early 90s.
I was Student Union president when I was 21 years old.
I remember.
Yes.
You know, you know, NANS used to be, you know, even then.
The president of NANS during my own time were two guys. That was Olusegun Mayegun, who was president of the University of Lagos Student Union.
Were you a president of the Student Union?
Yes, after Mayegun.
Okay.
So, and then when he left, Nasir Okura from BUK became NANS president. And then one fellow, Noja, was his secretary. all of us were undergraduates. So there was no room in those days for a PhD holder to be NANS president.
A PhD candidate, you mean?
Or candidate, whomever they call those ones. Anybody who is studying PhD in a university should be a member of ASU. Because what people must understand is that the moment you start your master's degree, you are already, if you want to, in the US, put in some kind of academic research or a supportive role to a professor in case you want to become a professor. That's how. I was a professor for 8 years with a master's with an MPA. So how do I go back to the University of Lagos, register for an MSc in maybe or PGD in the most popular one is what they call politics or international diplomacy, MILD, Masters in International Law and Diplomacy,
MILD.
And then I go back to NANS and just to become president of NANS. It is unbelievably dishonest and disgraceful.
It's very interesting.
And that they even try to defend it is the worst thing that I've ever heard, you know. But the truth is that they actually go register so that they can take over NANS. Because it is the people who need them that will tell them where to register to go to school so that they will have that credential. According to them, there's a clause in the NANS constitution that says anybody that has an 18-month program can become NANS president. And so they'll go and register somewhere. They may not have even been to that school before. We call them non-academic students in our time, or career students. And so many of them were students some 15 years ago. The one that have been beaten up, Atiku Issa Abubakar, used to write articles for us in Sowore Reporter some 10 years ago.
Are you serious?
And then one day he called me and said, I'm going to become NANS president. My first reaction is that, don't you have kids who can do that? What's wrong with you? Of course, I defend his right to personal liberty and dignity. But I do not support him going back to the university. Atiku Issa is probably about my age. And that's the question I asked him. So what are you doing in NANS? Of course, his response is that, well, the other guys are my age, too. So I asked him, where did you go to school? He said he's doing law. He went back to read law. What university is that? Some Kogi State University. I'm sure he went to register to read law for the purpose of... and when he was about to do his inauguration, the people he invited had nothing to do with NANS. Atiku Abubakar, Shekarau, Wada, who was former governor of Kogi State. Those are the people, and he tried to use me to legislate. He invited me, and I told him, I said, can you send me the list? And I sent him a message. I said, who amongst these guys even participated in student unionism during their own time? Most of them didn't even go to school.
So you didn't go?
No, I didn't, of course. I rejected it outright.
I understand that if Governor Shekara was there and he was even rough-handled.
Yes, because that's what NANS has become. It has become like an organization for people who engage in thuggery outside to become, of course, the thuggery wing of the ruling party or whomever is in charge of NANS. So I started a campaign yesterday, say free NANS. That's like, NANS should be returned to undergraduates. See, one thing that people don't understand about this National Association of Nigeria Students is that it is not just an organization to fight, it's a training ground for people who want to lead in the future. I left the University of Lagos some 35 years ago, but my best credential is based on my integrity as a student union leader. In fact, all these leaders in Nigeria, whenever they want to come and campaign for office, they will tell you they were student union people before. They will figure out, or they will say they are former activists. So, and when NANS was NANS, it was a tough place, you know, or student union for even people, no matter who you are, if you don't have the credentials, you can't become a student union leader.
I was going to say,
do you know that Soludo tried to become a student union leader at Nsukka? He lost.
Is that so?
Yes.
Wow, okay. I didn't
so
know that.
It took him how many years later to become a governor? Because the students didn't accept anybody who was not radical enough, who was not, well-informed,
Which school
exposed.
did Soludo go to? Was it?
As Nsukka is in the University of Nigeria. So this Soludo solution he was using was his campaign.
Is that so?
It's in Nsukka in those days. So a number of these guys.
80s.
Yes,
Sure.
no, it is. They were together with, I think it was Chima Obani that defeated him.
Okay. Oh, wow.
As the secretary of the student union. So
Interesting.
in those days, so many of the guys who are now couldn't win NANS elections or student union elections because the student union elections were very democratic, they were transparent, and it was rigorous.
But the question is, so how did NANS got to that state? When did that decline start?
No, it was under the military. It was Babangida.
No, it was under the military. You were the president.
Yes, but it was during Abacha that they finally got NANS. And they just had been after all the pressure groups in the country.
Right.
They had come after the Nigerian Medical Association, the NBA, they disbanded the NLC.
And rebranded it.
I rebranded it, and they became a transport union instead of workers' union. They gave them buses. So NANS was the last one they couldn't break because we were there. But the moment we were leaving, they introduced cultism to start suppressing genuine student activism on campus. I was attacked by cultists on campus.
I remember.
The guy in that Ife, Obafemi Awolowo University had the most vibrant student union at that time, but we were competing. I was president of the University of Lagos Student Union when Ebuade Borowa, we call him Big Sam, SAN now,
yes,
was president at
Ife.
Yes, and Mike Guinea was president at Benin. So imagine the quality of students at that time and where we are today.
Yeah.
You will recognize who we were to have led students. So you cannot be a fool and lead students successfully in our time. Students would impeach. There used to be a student parliament.
Of course.
Just so that you know,
of course,
it is the undergraduate student union leaders that are members of the NANS Senate. The NANS Senate is the parliament of NANS.
Yeah.
So how do you then go to a Senate of NANS made of undergraduate students and you are in front of your grandparents?
Tell us, I don't think you've shared this story nationally, and since it's very, it's in line with what we're talking about, the descent of NANS. What really happened to you? I know that you came to the US and you got some treatment. Can you tell us the story of what happened to you in that repression of Abacha, which is where you said the turning point for NANS descent?
Yes. So what happened was that after June 12th election was annulled, the central opposition in the country was initially made up of politicians. But it is characteristic of them, they all sold out, or mostly. The ones that didn't
That was before the formation of NADECO.
Yes, it was also about the time NADECO was formed. NADECO was formed, I think, around 1994.
Yeah.
But we started the opposition against military rule, against
right
military.
After the annulment.
Before the annulment. We did Babangida must go in 1992.
Well, that's true.
Yes.
Even 89, when I was still in school, we did.
Exactly. 89, there was anti-surprise. So imagine those struggles. You can even go back to as far back as Ali must go. You know, Shegun Okeowo led this. These are genuine students and genuine struggles. In fact, it is part of Nigeria's history that the first set of people who started agitating against colonialism were students, the National Youth Movement.
Yeah.
So all this about Macaulay that you are hearing about, Obafemi Awolowo, Azikiwe, they were students abroad who came back.
Yeah.
Even in larger African anti-colonial movement, people like Nkrumah, they all came from
as
student movements.
Yeah.
And then they came to Nigeria, and then we got independence. And the student tradition of opposing oppression and fighting using socialism continued.
Yeah.
Yes, because most of the student leaders were Marxist
socialist movements.
So, and that was the basic ideology that was guiding the student movement. So, but during our own time, to go back to the 1993s or early 90s, when NADECO was formed, NADECO left. So we're the ones left on ground fighting the struggle. And they decided first to start distracting us with cultism. Because they would arrest us and the students would fight back. And they were just so they introduced what was then known as informal repression. The military, knowing that they could be held accountable for directly killing people, started using the courts in the university to distract.
The cults.
Yes, that is the cult gangs.
Group, yeah.
Yes. So on our campus, it just flooded our campus one time. And we said, no, this is not going to happen. And we did our research and discovered that a lot of them are children of the rich and military guys outside.
They were in the
They were on campus funding
the gangs.
The gangs. And so we confronted them. So I was attacked by the gangs. But before I was attacked by the gangs, I had also been arrested severally. I'd had several queries and suspensions fall at me because I spent 2 years as student union president.
Okay.
Because of June 12th.
In your own view, how can we get that Nigeria of late 80s, early 90s that stood firmly against military dictatorship? How can we get that kind of society back? You have experience in this, but what's your take?
Of course. You see, let me address quickly what civil society is. Civil society of today is not the civil society of those days. In fact, part of the problem that Nigeria was confronted with during military rule and as we were exiting was to have allowed what became civil society to be what it is, which is all these non-governmental individuals who just created organizations and asked, every one of them said they will fight for human rights, they will fight against oppression. But it's all about conferences. And how many conferences you can attend. And so many times it's the same people that attend each other's conference and then you get grants and a lot of them become rich off of it. So that civil society also cannot, because the people who are giving you grants also don't want you to become a social movement. There's no grantee or grantor that funds social movements. They don't want you to destabilize or flow to the West. They don't actually want you to fight for the kind of democracy that can bring relief to your country. They just want you to keep doing what is acceptable. And that's why they keep bringing international standards. Oh, don't engage in violence. So, they have standards that are acceptable to them, which pretty much just regulate your behavior. And that's where the NGOs are. That's what the CSOs are doing. So, and you can go to conferences across Africa. You can find 2,000 NGO leaders. There are probably more than 10,000 NGOs in Nigeria who officially register to say, we are going to be fighting for democracy and against oppression, against police brutality. But you can never find 10,000 people participate in the protests against police brutality from the NGOs. Yes.
Interesting point.
They don't do that. In fact, it has become part of their agenda to merge with the state. So they say, you can't be opposing the state. So you go to a conference with the IG to discuss torture, and then everybody is like backslapping at the place, and then
but the idea of sitting down with the IG to discuss torture is not completely useless if you go to say the truth.
No, but the IG who invited you to a conference doesn't want to hear the truth. He wants to know you so that you don't do your job anymore. You don't criticize him. He wants to become your friend. That's what those interactions are facilitated.
But I'm saying that if these people were, courageous people, bold people who knew what they are doing,
but I've explained to you that it's not they didn't design themselves to oppose the IG. The design, most of the NGOs have become an appendage of the problem they are fighting against. So if you are fighting against police brutality, you are friends with IG, and so they'll call you once in a while and say, hey, do you have anybody we can release from police detention? Because they release for you, you write it down that, the IG is our friend, we called him, But it's not supposed to be at the behest of the oppressor. So we're calling the oppressed, like, okay, we have 100 bills. Some of them, please, so don't mention that particular case.
Holding the person beyond 48 hours.
That's what they're using, holding people. That is their holding charge.
Okay, let's go back to the point.
To show you a stamp.
I get the point.
Filing.
So how do we?
So to go back to recreate that is, look, there needs to be some serious collaboration between the streets and our campuses, but it cannot happen by NANS. I can tell you that. And it probably can't also happen by the student unions. The student unions have become so. I don't know how to describe.
We're in real trouble.
Yes. So it has to be a recruitment of young people who are suffering, they're oppressed on the streets, and also an outreach to campuses where you can find some progressive students to create cells and clubs that are well focused on reconnecting with their folks outside and then fighting together. So, for instance, we've had some limited success at Obafemi Awolowo University. I just went there to speak. You cannot believe that. You can't even find a campus almost anywhere in Nigeria where if you are not an entertainer, you can speak.
Wow.
I was going to speak at Ife. They canceled the hall that I was supposed to use 4 different times. I ended up in what we used to call common room in a hostel at
That was where you
Obafemi Awolowo Awo Hall. Awo Hall is that's where we eventually met. But they so scared the student union they couldn't advertise my coming. They kept stopping them. Because one other problem is that we must also not forget is that security agencies have also taken over campuses. For instance, you cannot become a NANS president without a verification from the DSS. Can you believe that?
When did that start?
They started in, I think, in the 2000s. So the DSS is the one who verifies who can be. So if they disqualify a NANS president based on his radical antecedents, he's gone.
Are you serious?
Yes. And then NANS no longer hold their convention on campuses. It's held at the old parade ground here in Abuja. So for you to get there, you must be armed to the teeth. And
you must have some money.
And you have money. So they would have decided who is becoming president. There's no year in which NANS had a convention at the old parade ground that there's no shooting.
Okay.
And the old parade ground is surrounded by military installations.
Yeah.
And,
so I mean, the problem, the way I see Sowore is that when we were under the military, we had NANS, we had the professional bodies. There was even a time where we had the professionals coming together.
Yes.
You know, so we had
the labor union, Pegasen,
very strong under the military.
Yes.
Now, it seems that after the military, when we won democracy, everybody just went to sleep.
But the question you should ask yourself is, did we just transition to civil rule or democracy? I think there's a difference. We transitioned to civil rule. We didn't transition to democratic. The democratic culture is completely, absent from the transition we had. And this was because the guys who were military just removed their uniform and hijacked the process immediately. So the mistakes they made as military, they no longer make. They don't make any now as civilians because they figured everybody out. They know how you can react. They know how long your reaction can take. And I was saying this to you when we started the conversation before we came even online here, that they have now mastered even the strategy of creating opposition for themselves. So sometimes you just think that somebody is opposing the ruling government. They are not. They put them out there so that the real opposition cannot emerge.
Interesting.
Because you say, okay, they're already opposing them, now what do we need to do? And they are the loudest. You see them in every TV station. A few weeks later, they are saying that, oh, I have now seen and understood the system better. And, democracy is the best. So before you know it, they have offered them appointments. Yes.
Okay, so let's look into that a little bit.
What I wanted to say about the military
is
that, you see, the enemy was well defined during military rule. It was the military. Yes. They were well defined and we knew how many there were. There weren't plenty.
And we could identify them.
We had the head of state.
We were not confused.
Yes, we had the military armed forces ruling council, we had military administrators. But now, you can't even count how many enemies against the people you have because it includes, every official and the people who claim to be the advisors and whether they are special advisors or assistants, they are in thousands sabotaging everybody. They have infiltrated society. So, and then there's a general confusion as to whether this is democracy or not. But on top of that, is how they have weaponized poverty, of course. So whoever wants to go out and fight now has to consider what happens when the fight is over. What if I get arrested? What if I get killed? Nobody supports you if anything goes wrong with you anymore. The support system, for instance, I go back to NANS, that NANS used to have, is non-existent. We used to be able to, during our time, I got expelled twice. We used to meet at Baka's office at number 8 in Maria Street. And we said, look, the lawyer assigned to me, I don't want it. I want this person. Yeah, some of us will say, no, we are too big for small lawyers. They should ask Gani to defend us. That was how comfortable we were with the external support. But now, which lawyer can you really go to, apart from Femi Falana, who is probably overwhelmed, who can provide pro bono services for students? No, you don't have that. We have more lawyers now, but not even the Nigerian Bar Association will get involved with cases of repression. When I was detained in 2019, the NBA did not make a statement about my detention. But in the U.S. Bar Association, the American ABA, was sending delegation to court each time I appeared.
Look at that.
But the Nigerian Bar Association never even mentioned that I was...
Very signal.
Yes.
Very signal.
So that support system is also something we have to look at.
Very critical.
Yeah.
So let's come home now to 2027.
Yes.
Peter Obi seems to be the more how do we put it now, the more outgoing among the opposition leaders, certainly much more outgoing in terms of what he says regularly. Of course, Atiku is also there. But what do you think about the fact that even the Labour Party, where Peter Obi is in shambles? So, do you think that the Peter Obi candidate that we had in 2023 is likely going to be the same in 2027? I wanted to ask you.
I just don't want to be talking about Peter Obi anymore. But I will say it because it's part of the issues that I raised. My position in 2022, 2023 is what is unfolding now. That contrary to the belief or the impression created that Peter Obi was opposed to the system or is capable of opposing the system, that he's incapable of doing it. I also stated in 2022, 2023 that the Labour Party was a short renter, what they call Airbnb in America. You move in, you check out when your time expires. And that when they are done with Peter Obi, they will move the renter to another place. So Peter Obi, maybe rightly or wrongly, or maybe he's doing it for sure, then decided that he doesn't want to move out of the short renter. And now he got locked in practically out. The reason why it probably got more attention was this. There was this whole debate around the Muslim ticket. So the Christians said, okay, you want to Islamize Nigeria, we want to Christianize too. And who was the best person available to them? Peter Obi. That's what happened. But in terms of opposition, I don't know why anybody calls Peter Obi opposition. But Peter Obi is not opposed to anything that the government is doing. Peter Obi did not even organize his supporters to fight for his own election victory, he claimed. He did not fight when they increased fuel price. He has never done anything that opposition people do. Even these terrible people that are in government now, no matter what you say of them, they used to protest. Buhari protested with his deputy, and they tear-gassed the man and he died after that. Tinubu, they organized several protests.
Exactly, all the way
they
from...
They were using Amechi them, people have forgotten. Nasiru used to go to DSS, they would arrest him, they would release him again, he would talk. So, you say you are opposition. Do what opposition do now, you can't do. And the only thing you can say is that, oh, there was no need for a protest in 2012. Where are the people? Are they dead? If the people in 2012 are dead or have sold out, what happens to you with 6 million voters? Put them on the street. Even if you can't put 6 million people on the street, put 60,000 people on the street in this Abuja and see how the government would take you serious.
Interesting.
But you are the one... You and your supporters are the ones who are pouring cold water on even any protests. Because you don't want the country to change. You want it to be replaced. You want the Tinubu group to either be replaced by your own group or for Tinubu to assimilate some of... Because look at all the Labour Party people in the National Assembly. They They are not decamping back to where they are coming from. They are decamping to APC.
So shameful.
And this is the point we're making, that these guys were not real. In 2023, they were not real. In 2027, they're not real. And I'll say one last thing about them. I think the Tinubu regime enjoys their type of opposition. Yeah. So you see that any time they seem to be phasing out, they will throw red meat at them because they know that this is the kind of opposition that doesn't pose any threat. These guys are never going to get upset to the point that they will turn Nigeria to Mozambique, where somebody stole the election and the person who gave the election and the one who stole have not rested. You know, so even countries like Uganda, you know, Bobby Wine now, they are giving hell to the people, the dictators. So you have them here. You say your opposition leader that is all, you know, attending.
Because of our time, Sowore, you know, one more thing that I wanted you to talk about, and then we close is, you know, these killings in Benue and Plateau. You know, for the first time, I believe, you know, maybe not the first time. I think Tom also said it. The governor of Plateau State said that this is genocide.
It is.
That's a big deal, you know. I mean, you lived in the U.S. too. You know the implication of a sitting government official saying that this is genocide and it's a crime against humanity. What's your take about what is happening in North Central Nigeria, especially the killings in Benue and Plateau? Final question.
See, this is the reason why the Christians in those places, or the people, genuinely wanted an opposition to a Muslim ticket. Because rightly or wrongly, they see this as some kind of jihadist attack on the population. And it's not just an attack, it's a campaign of dislocation, you know, and dislodgement. The people have been driven away from their ancestral land. And the moment they take it over, systematically, they change the name of the place and occupy it.
Yeah.
So there's no way to say it other than the way the government has said it. But the question that begs answer for me is that where is the Nigerian government? You know, where is the Nigerian police? Where is the Nigerian army? Is there some kind of agreement that in this particular area, the Benue and the Plateau, which are troughs and you know, and the platform, is there an agreement that the Nigerian government will allow this almost faceless? Because the way they describe them, you would think that they just drop from the sky, kill, and disappear. Is there an agreement that the Nigerian government will just allow these people to wipe out the ancestral ownership of those lands and then just ask them to? Because what you hear from the government is to say, well, maybe there's need for dialogue. How do you dialogue with people who are there to...
Who are terrorists,
yes. So that's the question that nobody is answering, and it can only be answered when you have real leadership in this country. Because I have never seen the level of compromise or a situation where somebody or a group of persons will be killed on that scale. And they will just behave as if we don't know.
And their land
occupied. You can understand, it's just like what they are doing in Gaza. Are you getting me? But in terms of Gaza, at least somebody is laying claim to those atrocities. The state of Israel, the U.S. is all involved. But in this case, nobody is claiming responsibility, but the systematic genocidal attacks on these two communities, or more, is happening. Because if you go even further in Gombe, well, things like, if you go to Nasarawa, stuff like that are happening as well. Where, you know, there's a systematic displacement of certain populations by favored population. And this also has political connotations. So, for me, people should ask, why is Nigerian government complacent or complicit in this?
In the whole thing. I hope, you know, as we conclude, I hope that this president, you know, I mean, by the way, I'm giving the president the benefit of the doubt. You know,
I don't.
I know, of course. I hope that he will have the inspiration to do better in terms of quelling the insecurity. If he doesn't, it will be a great disappointment.
Well, I don't know if it's not a great disappointment yet. I mean, how many people need to die before this is ended.
I remember a joke that I read on Instagram. A little girl was asking a older person, I think she was a teacher. He says that, you know, how long should you tolerate the friends who say bad things to you, who hurt you? And the teacher responded and said that, how long will you drink poison and then expect not to die?
Exactly.
Thank you so much, Sowore, for coming to Inside Sources. And thank you for what you represent in Nigeria. Thank you for your voice, you know, and thank you for your activism. And thank you for being forthright.
Thank you.
And thank you for coming to Inside Sources.
It's a pleasure.
And then